Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. In this video, I am going to teach you and demonstrate the dead snatch, which is one of my very favorite lifts, probably in my top 3 or even higher. It is a lift that I have probably more reps with or close to than almost any other. I've been doing this lift for 20 years. In fact, I've been doing this lift since before I even knew what a kettlebell was. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, give you some different variations, but more importantly, I'm going to teach you the nuances of this incredible lift so that you can enjoy it and meet your potential with this lift, because once you do, you're going to be addicted to it like I am and have been for 20 years. But once you really learn the technique and the nuances of this lift, then that's when you actually really get to explore and see what you're truly capable of. So I'm going to help to iron out some of those details so that you can get it, and once you do, you're going to love it. So stay tuned. If you want to play along, you absolutely can. You can grab some kettlebells. You don't need to go heavy. And I'm also going to demonstrate this with a dumbbell, as I kind of alluded to. All right, so if you want to play along, grab some kettlebells, dumbbell, and let's go. Let's talk about prerequisites. What work should you have done before you watch this video? You should have really good competency with the basic kettlebell exercises, okay? If you've never done a Turkish get-up before, you're skipping way ahead in the curriculum, and you need to back down and come visit this video again in a few months or however long the time frame. By the time you start developing this lift, I recommend that you have learned how to swing, clean, and also snatch a kettlebell with a ballistic snatch, okay? Because we're learning today the dead snatch. So it would be a good idea for you to have a really good awareness of how to get that kettlebell onto the back of your wrist without it banging before you learn the dead snatch. And you would develop that awareness, of course, in the ballistic, the traditional kettlebell clean, and also the ballistic kettlebell snatch, okay? With that said, if you don't have a kettlebell handy, or you've never learned those techniques, but you're ready for this lift, we are going to practice it with a dumbbell. I'm going to demonstrate that to you today. And of course, for that reason, you don't need to worry about that. So if you're learning this and it's banging your wrist, but you have a dumbbell handy, you could also apply everything that we're going to learn here to the dumbbell, okay? And I'm going to share with you a couple of the differences between the kettlebell and the dumbbell dead snatch. Here we go. Let's talk about the kettlebell dead snatch. Now, we've already learned from our deadlifts, and if you've done dead cleans, but this lesson is dead clean and dead snatch. Everything is going to apply to both of those lifts, okay? We've already learned where the dead position is, which is lined up to our heels, bell handle side to side, and right centered underneath my body, okay? That's the dead position. So unlike if I was going to swing the bell or a ballistic clean or snatch, I'd start with the bell up front, I'd swing it back, and I would begin. But with the dead movement, this is strictly up and down, so we don't need any of that front to back movement, okay? So we're going to start off in the dead position, and what you're going to do is you're going to come down in that deep hip hinge, and you're going to hook that kettlebell, and your free hand is going to come off to the side and follow the path of the hips or the path of the kettlebell, however you want to look at it. So as you come up, that free hand follows that path like that, okay? So this is the hand we're paying attention to in this demonstration, or in that part. So I'm just going to give you a side view of this before I get into a detail that is going to make every bit of difference in this lift, and it's going to unlock this lift for you, and it's going to give you the aha feeling. But let me show you this first from the side view. Okay, so here we go. So I'm sitting back into my hips. I've got my hook grip on that kettlebell, and I'm here, okay? If I was deadlifting the kettlebell, it would look very similar, but I'm now one arm here. Okay, now if I'm cleaning the kettlebell from dead, and let's practice this before we practice the snatch. That's what it looks like. So there's a few differences. One is, of course, the kettlebell doesn't have to make that U-turn that it makes in the ballistic clean, because in the ballistic clean, the bell is traveling backwards, and as the hips drive, the bell starts traveling forwards, and once it clears your body, you're pulling it up, you're taming the arc. And the path of that bell kind of makes a U-turn, starts climbing upwards, no longer front and back. With the dead snatch, or dead clean or snatch, there's no U-turn because the bell's just moving up and down. One difference. The other difference is that I don't have the elastic tension in my kinetic chain from the last rep that helps to drive the next rep. So when you do the eccentric phase, glutes and hamstrings, like rubber bands, they get lengthened out and they put that energy into the concentric phase of the next rep. With the dead snatch, you're intentionally losing that. Or dead clean, either way. Okay? So now, let me tell you guys the biggest hurdle, obstacle that people face, that even after they intellectually understand what they're doing, it still takes practice to stop doing it. But once you stop, you're going to unleash a tremendous amount of power. This is the thing that virtually everybody does when they're learning to dead, clean, or snatch a kettlebell, barbell, or dumbbell. Come down here. Usually people over grip it. So usually there's way too much fingers and the wrist is almost a little cockeyed. That's not the mistake we're discussing though, but don't do that. Hook grip, I would say 95 to 99% of the time when somebody's learning this exercise is dead snatching or dead cleaning, the beginning of the movement from here is not upwards as it should be, it's downwards like this. Okay? I'm going to do it again, and I'll do it a little slower. They're in this position. They're spring-loaded. Their back is flat. Safety check, taken care of. And then, as soon as they're about to clean the bell, what do? They decide they need to come down, bend their arm, shrug their shoulder, and try to yank that kettlebell up in this weird fashion. Your force generation sequence is completely destroyed. And you've got your arm bent when it should be straight. All kinds of things happen. Shoulder shrugged. Let's stop doing this. If you notice that you're doing it, perfect. Most people do. Very, very uncommon to see people who start off not doing that. So here's what we do. In this case, I have a 53-pound kettlebell. So here's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to dead clean it, and as I come down to get that bell, for a split second or however long I need as an individual to prepare, before I lift, I'm going to pull up on that handle by roughly half of the weight of the weight itself. So here I've got 53 pounds. I'll just put about 20 to 30 pounds of upward tension on it, like that, okay? And I'm pulling up through my hips on that kettlebell. I'm just barely pulling up. Now, as I go to snatch or clean, all I'm doing is continuing the tension or increasing that I already have. So it's here, I'm pulling up, and then it's up. So I'm not coming down and up. Really what I'm trying not to do is anticipate the lift, right? So here's what it looks like again. You get here and you spring down, try to come up underneath it. You don't need to do that. Come here, get your hips out back, hook grip on that kettlebell, pull up, and then from here, continue it up, okay? Now, we get to the second detail, the second thing that it's gonna put it all together, which is gonna play off of that first concept, which is when you are putting the power on the weight, whatever weight it is, the first third of the movement, so from here, the first third of hip extension to here is really little more than a deadlift. I'm not looking for a tremendous amount of power at this point. My muscles are so lengthened out that I'm not in that zone of contraction of greatest power anyway. So what's the point in trying to go from 0 to 1,000? Right there is no point in that first, say, 25 degrees of range of motion. In the middle, the second third, that's where I start to speed things up a little bit. And then the final third of the movement, that's where I'm really powering it. And honestly, it's that final third that is where it changes from a deadlift into a clean or a deadlift into a snatch. Because if I just slowed it back down on that final third, that would be a little more than a deadlift at that point, okay? Because I'm not trying to get a tremendous amount of power early in the movement. I'm waiting till the end to, and think about it this way, just use the word, accelerate the kettlebell or the dumbbell to the rack or overhead position. It's an acceleration. So pulling up with 20 pounds, and then I can just play around with that idea, and I can pull it up off the ground a couple of inches, and then snatch it up, deadlift it up. So I can kind of exaggerate. You see what I'm doing? I'm exaggerating the first third being a little bit slower there, just so you guys can see how I don't need to power it off the ground. It doesn't help. You're not looking for power at that point. You're looking for the power higher up in the movement. Same thing as I start to go a little bit heavier. Okay, just deadlift it up. And then snatch. Okay? So it's an acceleration of that weight. You're not jerking it up off the ground. And film yourself. Put a camera, side view, snatch it, and what you're paying attention to is the moment before the lift. Are you coming down, or are you just going straight up? And then are you accelerating? Ultimately, when you get this down, one of the pathways that you are strengthening is what we call our force generation sequence. Force generation sequence in a snatch is all of the muscles involved in the hinge, which is primarily glutes and hamstrings. So you got glutes and hamstrings, but you also have a rotation. You also have a lean, a sideways lean, as well as a shrug and a pull. Okay, so you've got all of those muscles responsible for those movements, obliques, abs, the extensors of the spine, upper traps, arms, grip. That's the force generation sequence, big muscles out to little muscles. And so once you develop that neurally, what you've done is you've learned how to use what's already there far more efficiently. It all starts to work together. So here we go. Now right here, I'm skipping over so many steps, you guys. This safety check that you're doing here at the bottom of this snatch, which is your packed lat, your flat back, your inhale, your braced core, your flat feet, alignment between hips, knees, and ankles, all of these things, you're not learning this on this exercise. You're learning this on the deadlift, which was a year ago, right? Like, this is way more advanced, and this is not time for me to explain. But I also don't want to gloss over the fact that all of these things are happening. Come down, it's the same safety check that you do for your deadlift, or the same safety check you would do for a ballistic movement, right? It's just that the bell's in a slightly different position. Hook grip, and then just accelerate, pull up, accelerate, up, okay? Now let's get into a few more details, because I really do like to test my body's capability to move at its potential within the confines of what I know to be safe and has proven to be safe in my own personal practice over tens of thousands of reps of any given exercise that I've done very heavy lifts and never had any injuries. So I pay attention to my body very carefully, and for that reason, I am able to go heavy without risking injury. So let's get into some of the details of going heavier. And the whole idea here, remember you guys, is that the idea is you go heavier is not to strain more. It's not to get all out of alignment and risk injury more. The idea is you go heavier is to learn how to make that weight feel even lighter than the lighter weight does. And you can't learn that unless you go heavier, because your nervous system isn't put in the position to where it needs to. So we're going to learn some of the techniques here. Now, when it comes to the dead snatch, the bilateral snatch, by the way, would be a barbell where I'm holding on to with two hands to that barbell, or if I did two kettlebells. We're talking about unilateral, so single kettlebell, single dumbbell, or even a single hand on a barbell. That's fine, unilateral, okay? So as I go heavier, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to rely simply upon the power development through my hips as well as the knee extension, so hip and knee extension, but I'm actually going to go into what we call triple extension, which means that once I've run out of movement in my hips, or as in a fluid movement, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up onto my toes. So up. I'm all the way up on my toes, which allows me to get even that little bit of more power from the calves, driving myself up with more power. The other thing that does is it lifts my body up higher, brings up the anchor, my shoulder with the kettlebell, it brings it up higher, which now, if I just come back down to my heels, that kettlebell is proportionately higher just simply because I ended up on my toes and then I came back down to my heels, okay? So now, as I start to develop this, I'm going to go triple extension and up, which would look like this. Okay? Or, and I'm really not warmed up for this, but this is going to probably force me into showing you what you're going to have to progress to beyond what I just demonstrated. That. Okay? That. So what I'm doing is I'm coming up to triple extension, getting this point as high as possible, but also keeping it centered. See how I'm leaning off to the side? Don't do that intentionally. Let proprioception guide you here instead of you trying to lean, okay? The shoulder stays over the fist stays over the bell stays over the dead position. The entire way up, you get your body out of the way, because otherwise the bell's going to go off in this direction. Then you catch it, and now you can bring yourself back into alignment now that the bell's stabilized. Got it? So on the way up, what you're not doing is coming out here like this. You're going here. Okay? Which brings me to the point that I was just showing you in the difference in the technique that happened when I went to the 88. Hips came all the way up into extension. I'm leaning off to the side. Bell floats, floats, floats. Now, instead of trying to catch it up here, landing on my heels, bell floats, floats, floats. I'm actually going to finish it by coming down underneath it into a little mini squat. It's also a squat with a lean because I've got to be off to the side to catch the kettlebell, which should still be centered. From the side view. And there. So you see that? Watch the hips. Hips, 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 hips. Hips extended, knees extended, ankles extended, bell floats. And then dropping back down into a squat, not a hinge. Okay? And then up to standing. Okay? Okay? It takes practice. It takes reps. If you're banging your wrist, or if you don't have kettlebells handy, this is how I learned to dead snatch. Because when I first learned how to dead snatch 20 years ago, I didn't even know what a kettlebell was. And we were dead snatching dumbbells. And of course, there is a difference in that you don't have to get the bell to the back of the wrist. But there's also another difference I want to point out because it's important, which is the handle on this and most dumbbells sits way lower than the handle for my kettlebells. Even a 4 kilo would sit higher than that. Which means that in order for me to grab this coming down in my hips, I have to have a lot of flexibility to get super deep to get down that low. Now I can do it and I can feel that I'm still got a good amount of tension, but even for me, that's at my limit for the hip hinge without rounding my back. And I'm super flexible and I got a lot of reps. So for most people, hey, you might be able to pull this off. It might be okay. Maybe you've got good range of motion, you can do it. But what I would recommend is getting a couple of 45-pound weight plates and lifting this up 3 or 4 inches and then doing it from there. That way, you know that you don't have to worry about rounding. And a lot of times that rounding, it doesn't occur until the moment you put the taps on. And there's just like this quick tuck as you drive the weight up. Those hamstrings that were fully engaged and lengthened had to engage, and they just kind of overwhelmed the lower back muscles that were, working as hard as they could, but it causes the pelvis to just kind of, on the way up, just kind of like a quick tuck. So avoid that by lifting the dumbbell up on at least, you could do it by 3 25-pound plates. Like you almost can't go wrong. You almost can't go too high within reason, right? But practice it this way. And of course, you have adjustable dumbbells that can be really handy. You can incrementally go heavier. But you can also do this without having to also focus on the banging of the wrist. Or like I said, if you don't have kettlebells handy, and really the technique is the same. I mean, there's really not a lot of difference except that you're not having to punch through as much, but it really doesn't feel that much different, except that you're just a lot deeper. okay? One final thing I'll leave you with the dead clean, dead snatch. Well, the dead snatch. This wouldn't apply to the dead clean. But there's a concept in weightlifting called eccentric overload. And I love eccentric overload in my training. I program it in intentionally. Also, intelligently, because you do have to be careful with eccentric overload because it does put a lot of stress on your body. So if you're deconditioned, it's not a good idea. But what eccentric overload is taking a movement with a level of intensity that I could not perform concentrically, but I am doing it now eccentrically, okay? So in this case, it would be a military press. So I might be able to take 100 pounds. I'll just demonstrate with my 88. And snatch it up overhead because I'm using all of these big muscles with that beautiful force generation sequence, everything working together to get it up there. So I'm using big muscles to get the weight up overhead, but on the way back down, I'm reversing the military press. I'm doing just the eccentric phase of a military press. Like that, okay? Now, I can't really military press this right now. Maybe if I was warmed up, I'd have a better shot. But what I'm doing is I'm forcing my body to have a higher intensity through the eccentric phase than it could do concentrically of any given lift, in this case, military press. You are about 30% stronger eccentrically than concentrically. So we're exploiting that gap. When you exploit that gap, your body responds. That's where it really starts to bust through plateaus and really starts to develop a lot of strength that may be untapped if you weren't able to sort of challenge your body in these different ways. So that's eccentric overload. There's countless ways you can do it. Anytime you put momentum onto a kettlebell and catch it in a certain position, generally the eccentric return is going to be overloaded as a result of that. So kettlebells are really good for that in general, which is one of the reasons people get so sore when they first start doing these ballistic exercises, is because they are doing that to their body. Enough said. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Hopefully this helps, and I share with you guys my passion for this incredible lift, the dead snatch, and also the dead clean. Those rules apply to both of them. I'll see you guys next time.